Out. This is the March installment of Ember.js NYC. So if you're in the wrong place, now's the time. A few updates on meetup stuff. One is, as always, I want to thank Pivotal for hosting us here and for providing pizza and beer. Pivotal is, for those of you who don't know, is an agile consultancy here in New York. Does a ton of Rails and JavaScript, iOS stuff. My good friend and brother-in-law, Micah Young, is a pivot who helps us out at this meetup. And if you are looking for a job, looking to join a great consultancy, you should talk to Micah. And so thanks again to Pivotal for hosting. We also have a few other sponsors that I want to mention who have been helping this meetup grow in ways that I didn't expect it would when we got started. And that is Teutonic, whose technology is led by Excel over here, Red Rover and Simple Reach, who have all kind of pooled resources and their spaces to start up a series that we've been calling Ember Hacker Hours. And these, unlike the monthly talks that we've been doing for about a year now, the Hacker Hours are less structured, more intimate gatherings, usually 20 to 30 people, where there's one-on-one mentoring, conversations, hacking, that kind of thing. And we've done 2 of them now. They've been great. Anybody here been to any? Raise your hand. Awesome. Michael, tell me, how was it? Just in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Okay, there you have it. So if that's appealing, get yourself to one. The next one is April 2nd at 6 p.m. It's going to be at Red Rover. We generally do have a cap in terms of number of people we can accommodate for those sessions, and it's just first come, first served. And do I have any other? Oh, and the other key thing to mention, meetup business-wise, is our next meetup is going to be April 25th, and we are tentatively going to have an out-of-town speaker flying in for that one. I'll announce it once it's solid, but that should be fun. And the format for tonight is going to be like this. We're going to do our friend Alex Trebek Machnier. Trebek is his fake middle name. Is going to lead us in Ember Jeopardy, which is going to be the container for our lightning talks tonight. Yet another groundbreaking move by the Ember.js NYC meetup. And then the second part of the evening is going to be a intro to Ember talk that I'm going to do at the request of a few people. So hopefully if you have been around the block with Ember already, you'll pick up a few things. And if you're new to Ember or evaluating it, as I know some folks are, it'll be a nice way to sort of get an overview of the framework. And I think with that, we're going to get right into it. Oh, before, anybody have announcements? Anybody hiring, other Ember-related events or things you want to mention? Bring a mic.
I'm Andrew Cohen. I started a company called Brainscape, and I'm kind of relearning to code on the side for a side project of mine in the education space. And Ember seems like it might be the right tool for what I'm looking for, either that or Knockout. But I'm enough of a newbie that the hacker hours probably wouldn't be quite enough for me. I'd be really interested in working with just a tutor. I'll pay top dollar hourly rate to really kind of work with me on this. So if anybody's interested, come find me afterwards. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks. Anybody else? Yep.
Hello. My name is Pavan Pudilam, and this is my first time over here. And it's nice to see such a big gathering, actually. So I'm doing a side project for a website called NetTuts. It's a net tutorial website. And I'm building a course on using Ember on the client and MongoDB on the server for building an end-to-end analytics application. So I'm doing the course as we speak, so it should be out in a month maybe. And it's probably a good place to learn the basics. Not the basics, but it's like a course on Ember, but not really an introductory course. There's one more coming on, which is the Getting Started with Ember. That should be out again in a month or so. And that's probably an introductory course, which will be on NetTuts probably by end of April. So make sure you guys take a look at that. And I'll circulate the link to Luke maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll send it out. There are more and more tutorials coming out every day. For those of you who haven't seen the peep code one, that's great. Definitely check it out. The embercasts.com is coming very soon, thanks to our friend Eric Brin, is spearheading that effort. And there's a sign-up link on the site right now if you want to put your name in. That's going to be screencasts focused on Ember. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to our friend Alex. This is the latest incarnation in something that actually started with Jeopardy a while back and has taken many twists and turns. I don't know why game shows have been associated with Ember, but it's been a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to continuing the fun tonight.
Great. Do you want me to use this thing or just pass it down?
I'll hold this in front of you.
Hi, everyone. Without further ado, let me, this is a slightly modified track just to get everyone sort of in the groove. It gets better. There's a lot of GarageBand action, so get ready. It's coming in about 8 seconds or so. Just wait for it, then we'll get started. All right. Yes, so this is GarageBand. Welcome to Ember Jeopardy. We have sort of an unconventional way that we're going to be doing this today, which is everyone here is going to be a contestant, and that's hard to speak over. That's just awful. All right, we can fade that out. Cool. So Ember Jeopardy. I don't really know how to pick the first candidate or first contestant. Luke, do you have any ideas? Is there somebody?
Who really wants it? Who really, David
thing
Yang. I knew it.
So the way this is going to work is you'll choose because you're there, and anybody, we're basically just going to, first person to shoot up a hand gets to answer it. And if you get it correct, then you get to take the mic and then pick the next thing, and so on and so forth. Also, I think it was said before, but there's a few quadruple doubles because there are 4 lightning talks, and when they come up, that'll be time for someone to come up and talk about a relevant subject. Most of them are actually pretty decently grouped in the categories, but some of them don't really fit, so there's a few little random scattered ones. So without further ado.
One further ado. I promised Alex that I was going to bring Tomster stickers as prizes for the people who got an answer correctly, and I left them at home. So what I'd like you to do, if you get an answer correct, it's going to be honor system. Would like you to tweet at Ember NYC and say, I want a sticker. And then I will make sure that you get a sticker at the next meetup.
Hi, I will take Ember handlebars for 200.
Let's do it. So this helper can be used to disable the default auto-updating behavior of data bindings.
What is unbound?
That is correct.
What is unbound?
What is unbound, the unbound helper? What'll it be?
Can I have views for 200, please?
Views for 200. This view hook fires after a view's element has been inserted into the DOM. Wait for it. Sorry.
Did insert element?
That is correct. Did insert element. Sorry about that.
What is?
Oh, absolutely.
What is did insert element?
Correct enough. Okay.
I'll take views for 400.
Views for 400. Use this property to specify a view's DOM element type other than div. Oh, you know what, Luke, I'll let you pick. You got the mic.
What is tag name?
What is tag name is correct. Oh, and also, for what it's worth, if we're blasting through these, and I mean, some of these questions are going to be a little weird and verbose and not make a whole lot of sense. If there's some discussion that you would like of what any of this actually means, or when you use it, please halt the process and ask, and there's no problem with that. Is there anything that's been discussed so far that you'd like a quick overview on? I'm sorry? The unbound helper, right. Unbound helper is a handlebars helper that you can use in your templates. And basically, one of Ember's main pluses is that when the underlying values that a template is tied to changes, then the template will auto-update. And very occasionally, you might not want that behavior. You want it to only render once, and then when that value changes, it doesn't automatically update that part of the template. So in that case, instead of just using handlebars foo or whatever, you would say you have those two handlebars unbound foo, and then when foo changes, that's not going to change the template. So sometimes you might do that for performance reasons. Sometimes you might do that for app functionality reasons, but it's there for when you need it. What's up, Chris? So any other questions before moving on? Who's got the mic?
Can I get the router for 600?
Router for 600. Override this route hook to convert a dynamic route segment to a context object that will be passed to the controller. That's just awful to say. Any takers?
Think this is setup controller?
That's not quite right.
What is the model?
That's it. Totally. So again, pause us if you need an explanation for what that is and why I would actually choose that for a question or answer versus something else. Guess not. So I'm going to pick the next category.
I have a quick question before we go on. What is this Jeopardy software that you're using to run this?
Oh, it's this new sort of up-and-coming JavaScript framework called Ember.
Well, really, was this a commercial product that you purchased for tonight?
No, it's free. There's I forget what I think it's Ember.js.com maybe. But
what about the Jeopardy part in particular?
Oh, I never heard of that game show before. It sounds like if you kept on saying that name, we might have to owe someone royalties or something. But did that answer your question, sir?
Well, what if I wanted to run my own Jeopardy game like this? Is there something that I could do to use this software?
Well, I've not pushed to the latest to GitHub because it contains all the questions, and I didn't want anybody sneaking and getting let's see, 30 Tomster stickers. So I'll push that afterwards. But there's a convenient little. Wait, why am I telling you that for? There's a link that you can click in the upper right of the projection screen that'll take you to the GitHub. I will tweet where you can take a look at the code and you can see what you think of my Ember chops. I'm sure there's a weird thing in there somewhere, but it's a decent little layout if you're trying to figure out how to do some wonky little 3D stuff with a decently small-sized Ember app.
Cool. All right, let's keep rolling.
Okay. 200 for culture.
200 for culture. This is the name of Ember's bespectacled rodent mascot.
Who is Tomster?
Who is Tomster is correct. What is Tomster?
Contributing for 200?
Contributing for 200. You should always try to create one of these when filing an issue to demonstrate the bug problem, and I would say there's 3 probably acceptable answers to this. Questions to this.
JS Fiddle or what is a JS Fiddle?
What is a JS Fiddle, a JS bin, or a breaking test case is correct. Because it's easy enough to say, this is kind of weird, and occasionally on this app with this weird specific state that you can't possibly replicate. So if you want Ember to get better, it's definitely helpful to go to Ember.js.com. I think there's a community section, but there's some links to some JS Fiddles and some JS bins that you can use to hopefully isolate whatever weird thing is going on and help us make the framework better. I can't believe I forget who's got the mic all the time. There. You are up. Oh, to look at a category that's on there.
Let's see. Views for 600.
Views for 600. This view class is useful for manually managing a view hierarchy. Just getting a workout.
You guys sit next to each other.
Container view? What is the container view?
What is the container view is correct. Again, pause this if you got any questions for what all this stuff is about. When would you use a container view? So first off, container view is it's a subclass of Ember.view, and it's got a few functions exposed for appending a view to as one of its child views. So if you need to, I mean, it's not that frequent of a thing since there's a lot of other facilities for either rendering something in a template or you have nested outlets with content inside them and so on and so forth connected to the router. But occasionally, if you need to dynamically take this view and put another view in there and append something to that inner container view, then container view is the class that you could use to get that done. Yeah.
Right, but you can programmatically manage what those things are, which makes it. I think of it as being really useful when you have a set of views that might be user defined. So if you were building some kind of widget system where a user could, reorder and select what widgets they want in there, a container view might be really useful for something like that.
$200 for Ember application architecture.
This scheduling mechanism is what drives data binding in Ember. Could the most correct people please bundle up into a title?
What is the run loop?
Correct, Satan.
The run loop.
The run loop. Yeah, sorry, I think everyone heard the demon answer that question.
I'll take culture for 400, please.
Oh yeah, bring the other guy back. He's a good guy. Okay, this service, which uses Ember.js front end, verifies that GitHub pull requests pass all test cases.
What is Travis CI?
What is Travis CI? And that's totally correct. That's a wonderful little piece of software to basically make sure that, well, it is what it's exactly what this answer here says. When someone has a pull request and we want to actually make sure it doesn't break Ember, it will go through and basically run all the test cases for that pull request and make sure that whatever's about to get merged into master is actually legit.
And one cool thing to know about about Travis CI, if you don't already, is that it's open source, and because it's an Ember app and Rails in the back end, and it's open source, it means you can go look at it. So if you're curious about how a certain thing is done, it can be a useful thing to do. Question, does it use the new router? Does anybody know the answer to that?
I think it actually does.
I don't know if they've updated, but it was one of the earlier Ember apps, and they've kept going. The other app that you may have heard of, it's a great open source example, is Discourse, which definitely uses the new router. Oh shit! Sorry about that.
You should be less informative.
No, anything. So like they have, it can build. It uses Vagrant, so it basically will spin up a VM, and has a bunch of stuff that's available to you to run your builds, including Postgres and MySQL and Redis and these kinds of things. But you can install your own stuff as part of your build process also. They have a private. I don't know if it's widely available yet or not, but there's a commercial version as well. So if you want to build private GitHub projects, we use it at my company, and it works great. Cool.
Oh, no, you got to guess the categories.
I could have guessed. 400 Ember application architecture.
Use this property to give controllers access to specific other controllers. Property on Ember.controller.
What is need?
What is needs? We'll accept the singular version. Needs. Right, gotcha. What is ne? Any question about needs? It's kind of a bit of a sort of esoteric. Sure.
I didn't mention that we're videotaping tonight, and the audio from these mics is what's going in, which is part of why I'm madly running around the room. So if we get a question that's not mic'd, just repeat it.
Sure. I might not be able to repeat it at this point, but could maybe pass on the mic real quick.
I was wondering, so this is a property you define on a controller, and how does your controller get access to this, and what's this is injected into it somehow? How does that work?
You're saying a lot of words that are similar to other questions that might come up. So I'm wondering how to answer this sort of thing.
I know nothing about Ember.
Without using fancy terminology that might give away another cell and another Tomster sticker, the idea behind needs is that if, say, you're defining the comments controller, which is in charge of displaying all the comments under a certain post, and you need to, from the comments controller, check some property on the post controller, which is sort of like the parent controller, then you could say on the comments controller needs post. And then what that means is that a property called post will be put on the, this is so hard to just explain. It means that comments controller will have a property called controllers, and inside of that is a post, and that is your reference to the post controller when you need to get it. It's way better than the previous, like a year ago, the way you would have done this is that most of the controllers would have been these like singleton instances on the app namespace, and it's kind of a really dirty, hackish way of doing things. It's not always.
That's the only way to do it. I'm very happy to have learned this.
Oh, there are alternatives. Yes.
My question has to do with needs, and for example, in my application, I have a controller that's an application controller and another that's an object controller. Can you use needs between controllers of different types, like for example?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
As long as it is a controller, then you can basically have that property injected into another controller for when you need it.
I'm going to cover some more of this topic in the my talk later too, so we can dig more in.
Can I get the router for 800?
Router for 800. I can't believe we haven't had a lightning talk yet. It's ridiculous. These public API route hooks fire when entering and exiting a route respectively. And it's not enter or exit. I'll give you that hint. Public API is key. So those are supposed to be private. Any ideas? He's looking up the source right now.
What is serialize and deserialize?
That's not quite correct. Serialize and deserialize was the proposed answer or question. And
yes, anybody else want to take a crack?
Did load route, did enter route, did exit route?
Nope.
A good guess, especially for a Sprout Core app.
Is that what it was?
No, it was with that Sprout Core-esque.
Gotcha.
What is activate, deactivate?
Yep, correct. What is activate and deactivate? So routes, and even in the old router, there's these functions, enter and exit, which you could use for such a thing, but they are no longer exposed. I mean, you can use them if you want, but you are encouraged to use and expected to use activate and deactivate for whenever you need to override those public hooks for some special logic for when you're about to enter a route or exit a route.
Are they exactly the same?
As what? As enter and exit? Yeah, for all intents and purposes. I don't honestly remember the difference. Do you know? Yeah, sorry, I wish I had a question. Sure. So activate is going to fire when you first transition into a route. So that could also be like the parent route that has like some leaf route, which is the ultimate destination route. And along the way to that transition, that parent route's activate will be called, and then that leaf route's activate will be called. And when you link to or go somewhere else and transition out of that route, their deactivate functions will call for each route that's being exited. Yeah. So there's a few different things. Like you could, I think Gordon Hempton, who's a sort of active Ember contributor, had a post one time about using those hooks for sending data to Google Analytics. And because, it's Google pretty good at if you have these like, static, fully reloading pages. But for Ember, it's not as much information there. So you can sort of catch when somebody goes to a different route and have that pass as data to Google Analytics. So that's one use case for it. So who's up?
Take handlebars for 400.
Handlebars, Ember handlebars for 400. Use this function to declare your own bound handlebars helpers.
What is what is register bound helper?
Register bound helper is correct. Any questions about how helpers are useful and how they work and so on? So there was originally a function just called register helper, I think, and that's what has been around since the beginning of Ember. And the only thing that's sort of missing about that is that when the underlying data that's being presented by that helper changed, it would never get re-rendered. So Gordon, that guy I was just talking about, like a few months back, finally got his request checked into master for bound helpers. And basically the way it works is that you provide like the path to what property you're watching, and when it changes, the whole helper gets re-rendered. So it's basically responds to when data changes now in a way that old helpers did not used to. It's still, so register helper is deprecated was the question. It's still there when you need it, but most use cases you should probably use register bound helper. There's still a lot of older helpers that use register helper because they go through some hoops to make that work.
Maybe an if block. Perhaps an if block, or right. So the question was that he was using register helper, and it wasn't updating when the data changed, and so he was able to wrap it in some kind of block, maybe a bind block. So the only thing I just wanted to add to this that to keep in mind as you think about Handlebars is Handlebars is an open source project on its own that's used in lots of different JavaScript environments, and it knows nothing about data binding. It's just for rendering stuff. And so everything that Ember Handlebars adds on top of Handlebars is mostly about data binding. So register helper, for example, is something that you can do in Handlebars. You can add plain old Handlebars helpers, and the downside, of course, is that they're not going to know about binding and be able to observe properties. So just something to keep in mind as you think, like, why does something work that way? Why did we have to have this special register bound helper thing? And it's because all the data bound stuff in Handlebars is courtesy of Ember Handlebars. Next up.
Ember application architecture for 600.
This might be it. Might finally be it. A daily quadruple. I'm missing the sound bite for it, but actually, is Chris here right now? Or oh man, he's going to be here very soon. Expect a standing ovation when he gets here, but he will eventually talk about Oasis.js. Sure. So we'll move on and come back to that when he comes.
Contributing for 400?
Contributing for 400. Every behavior changing did I already do this? I might have. This is sort of different. Every behavior changing pull request should come with some of these. So in other words, if you have an idea of something that you want to make better about Ember, and you've changed the code and you checked it in and made a pull request to Ember master, what should that code change also have for us to sort of take it seriously?
What are tests?
Yes, that's exactly right. So what are test cases? Got to actually show that whatever's been added does what, you can sort of demonstrate that it does what it says it does. I don't know. Is it like 6,000 or something? About 6,000 test cases validating Ember behavior for all sorts of different libraries. So definitely. Oh, you keep on choosing these things that are other. Actually, it's actually different than the other one. So if you checked out the Ember.js repo, you can run through the tests in two ways. You can do it through the console by just saying rake, which will build it and then run it through the test cases that you can see sort of pass or fail on in the terminal. Or you can start up a rackup server with just rackup, right? And when you go there, that's going to be just a giant QUnit test suite, which by default will go through all those 6,000 test cases, and you can narrow it down to a specific library that you're working on if you don't want to run through all those. And then if one thing's breaking, just run that. But it's quite a well-populated test suite.
Architecture for 1,000.
For 1,000. Yeah. You can call these application methods to defer an advanced app initialization. So if you don't want, yeah. Sorry, gotta make Luke do a 400 dash.
What is advanced readiness?
And
defer until ready. Defer readiness.
Accepted, yes. Advanced readiness and defer readiness. So if you want to say something, or?
Go ahead.
Okay, so if you don't want your router to, or sorry, if you don't want your application to kind of sort of start the application life cycle, you want to wait around for, I don't know, some library to load or something, you can tell it to, you can say application.defer readiness, and that will just wait for the final advanced readiness to come along to match the number of deferred readiness that you called. And when the final one has been called, it will actually start the application, start the routing, and so on and so forth. I don't know if you want to comment on any use cases or.
Sure, I'll just mention that if you are doing a mobile app where you're wrapping, wrapped in PhoneGap, for example, this is, you know that you need to wait not just for DOM ready, but for device ready, which is an event that PhoneGap fires for you when all the native APIs are ready to call. So that's a great use case for this. So you just defer readiness, and then when that event fires, you say advanced readiness. Ember keeps track of the count for you, the number of times you've deferred, and when you get back to 0, app continues. And before I hand the mic back to Pawan, I just want to say that it gives me great hope that the person who's writing a tutorial about Ember is getting a lot of these questions right.
Thank you. I'll go for 600 on culture.
Quadruple. Yes. Okay, Michael Madrid, come on down.
All right, come on up, Michael.
Come on up, come on down. I'm not sure the easiest way to do this. Let me just disconnect this. Crambear? No. Crambear.
Okay, wonderful resolution there. Okay, so last time I spoke a little about Devise and Ember, and I think I mentioned that I was working on a flashcard app. I've made some progress, maybe a little less than I'd hoped, but this is a learning experience and hopefully help you guys learn from my experiences. So this does do the basic things it's supposed to do. You can click on these and get things right and wrong, and you'll get a result at the end. So fairly standard. And then, okay, so what my point here is to look at the GitHub. This is me, Kagemusha, and this is the Crambear project. It's totally open. I encourage everyone to look at it and to participate. It is not cutting-edge Ember code. A lot of it is probably wrong, but I will, as I learn from the experts, I will, get that in here. And the point of this is really to have something a little more complex than, not too complex that it's not a good learning tool, but a little more complex than just the basic to-do, which is on one page of a JS bin, which we all see. So here we have a model, we have cards which belong to card sets, and you have labels within each card set which you can apply to cards. So you have all your standard relationships. I guess there's no one-to-one, but that doesn't matter as much as one-to-many and many-to-many. These are, particularly the label is not implemented. I don't know how to do many-to-many in Ember data, and I think maybe a lot of people don't because it's probably in flux right now, right? So even anyone who knows how to do it, it's probably going to change fairly soon. Just another couple things about this project. Do I have it somewhere here? Oops, that's wrong. That's something else. I mean, it's not wrong, but is that it is using Emblem.
Hey.
Which I don't know. Somebody somewhere wrote Emblem, and I mean, I like it a lot. They like live across some river or something. So I don't know who it is. I've seen the person online a couple times, but corresponded anyway. But this is 100% Emblem. I haven't had any problems with it once I learned how to do it. So it is certainly a lot easier to look at than Handlebars, and seems to do everything Handlebars does. So I encourage everyone to look at it and try it. So I do intend, obviously I haven't done anything on snippets and examples, but this is something I hope to complete to make the journey a little easier, and just to go over it a little and some of the things I found difficult and which hurdles you'll have to go get through to really do Ember well. One is magic naming, and I think the first two are maybe even kind of together, in that Ember has very different way of accessing things than you're used to. You can't just say, for instance, oh, in my route, I'm going to say I have a controller called app.postController, and I'm just going to refer to that like that in my route and call some method on it. Even within, say, a controller, if a controller has a name method, you're not going to say this.name. You're going to say this.getName, this.setName. So they're very specific ways. And also, as mentioned before, the needs keyword for controllers. You can't just refer to some other controller, even using the get and set, if it's not set with needs. So the interactions they're not completely, they're getting there, but sometimes it's a little difficult to know how exactly things are interacting and how you can call things. Magic naming is another thing. Sometimes if you name things correctly, they will magically, your controller will find your view, and they'll both find your template, and it's just this, they're all together hugging each other, and it's just wonderful. On the other hand, sometimes you think they are, and what Ember does is if it doesn't find something, it will create it for you. So you're like, I named this goddamn thing correctly, and there's no error. Why isn't it calling my method or finding my method? And that's because Ember said, oh, something was just a little amiss. I know your intentions were good, but it's not quite correct, and so I have created this thing for you as a service, and I'm going to ignore what you wrote. So those, I think, the first two items kind of, well, what I want to say with those two items is this general problem of finding out how these communications are done in Ember. So that's something which you're going to have to get by. The third thing, outlets versus render versus partial versus view and template, these all have different properties, and some of them are documented. Outlet, I think, is pretty well documented. Partial render, I'm not so sure as much. View is fairly well documented, but it's not always immediately clear which one you should use. So that's something which I hope to explore more, and hopefully that will be better elucidated by the Ember team. So the next, this is really two, but I must have forgot a bullet point, but loading objects, this is more Rails thing, active model serializers. Side loading, Ember data, as mentioned, that's all in flux. So that can be difficult sometimes. Some people will go back to just loading, if you're talking to your server, just loading things through JSON, through Ajax. So that hopefully is something which is going to get a lot better sooner. And view and capturing user events. I think I'm getting a little better in that, but that's another thing. If you're wondering where you find what events views can respond to, it isn't really in the tutorials, but if you look in the view class, the API, they have they have the list of events which a view will respond to, so you can look there. And I think that is probably about it. So if anyone has any questions. Oh, also, I encourage participation, so anyone who, in fact, I do have, a few outstanding issues somewhere on the on this page, some current issues, and that's just a representative sample. There are sure a lot more, so encourage participation. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. So if you're looking for a project to kind of help out with, to help yourself learn, working with Michael seems like could be a fun thing to do. So let's see. Because Michael gave that talk, we're going to let him pick the next square as well.
Oh, did you have any answers or questions you want to ask? It's hard to convert those things, but I guess it was sort of the plan. If you want to improvise a question for somebody to answer, or if you just want to move on to the next category, whatever makes the most sense. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It can be about the presentation.
I could use one of my flashcards. Ha 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 ha.
I got one about the project. This project, hosted on GitHub and authored by Michael Madrid, is a more sophisticated learning environment than the classic to-do MVC app. What is Crambear is correct. Nice. Well done, well done. Sure.
Ember handlebars for 600.
This helper will insert a view into the template and attach it to a controller.
This is a long shot, but is it render?
Yeah. Was that sarcasm? I couldn't tell.
No, that was an honest guess. Like I was
no,
like,
that's
that sounds
totally
like
right.
what this is. Yeah.
So sort of, this was one of the rendering helpers that Michael was talking about, sort of being maybe confusable with a lot of the other ones that are there. But you know, I guess one like less. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. I guess to answer a question no one's asking, but render is like the view helper, which will insert a view, but it'll also go an extra mile and connect it to a controller, because you're definitely always encouraged to use these sort of pairs or triples and quadruples even, but just tying your views to controllers and putting a lot of logic there versus trying to put it all in the view. Yeah. Okay, so the question was, how does that relate to the control helper? And man, I don't know if I want to be the one to field that question. I'll try, and if someone wants to correct me, that'd be great. Not quite. I mean, control has its own controller and render has its own controller, but there's different logic as to what kind of controller is selected. So, for instance, the control helper. Luke, you want to help me out here? Like, I can sort of describe it, if I'm just.
So my understanding, I don't know if I'm totally with it. It's for those of you who don't know, control is an experimental handlebars helper that's can be enabled in current Ember Master with the flag. The difference between those two, if I had to summarize, I would say that when you use a control helper, you're getting a new instance of a view and a new instance of a controller. Whereas when you're using the render helper, you're getting a new instance of a view, but you're getting the singleton controller.
I actually, this is the code for Ember Jeopardy, and there's a use case here that would have been filled by control, but I didn't want to use it because right now it's kind of wrapped in this environment flag. You have to say like enable control experimental something or other, and put it on this env object, which will be read by Ember when it's first loaded. Otherwise, it's not going to recognize a control helper. But there's a use case in here that sounded like it would have been solved by here, and it's by far the hackiest part of this this code. And I think it'll illustrate when it's good to use something like control when it's been sort of perfected and ready for prime time. So you guys have seen this whole deal where there's, first off, I think this is actually a good use of time, so bear with me here. All of these questions and answers are in this big YML file, which gets sort of turned into JSON, and that's something that that gets sort of loaded into the HTML and in a little sort of separate script tag that the Ember controllers know how to read and make sense of. And thank you for doing that, because it must have been pretty illegible. And let me make this a little bit bigger. So for each of these things, there's a column controller, which has information such as the category and also like an array of questions. And it's all just sort of taking a chunk of this serialized JSON from the YAML file. And there's some logic here that basically each cell needs to know needs to know what row and what column it is. And in order for this particular cell, which has its own, I think it's called question controller, or maybe cell controller, probably question controller, it needs to know that it's at this particular row, at this particular column, so that the view can sort of tap into that and figure out where it needs to place itself. And just sort of a quick thing, I don't want to, the fancy little flipping over and so on and so forth. This quick overview of this is that each one of these cells is like, if you look at the CSS it's like none of the CSS3 like 3D stuff. It's just like an absolute position thing to just like totally fill the screen. And the way it works with this grid is that you apply some CSS3 that kind of pushes it into the screen, and then that's why it's small. And there's a certain like perspective that you've chosen so that the animation looks about right versus looking like some weird thing. But in order to actually position this and tell that this $1,000 thing, which is without the CSS3, like some full screen thing, you need to know what row and column it is so you can push it this way and like move it a certain way like into the screen. And so that information is, it turns out that the control helper would actually be very useful in getting that kind of information. And the reason why is that the render helper, as was said before, it will attach it to a kind of global singleton controller that, if you render two different things called grid right next to each other, they'll kind of both attach to the same controller. Maybe that might not even work, I'm not even sure. But control does some interesting logic with sort of rendering its own little controller, and it's sort of rendered in the context of a container that's in its own sort of little world. And I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining this, but what I ended up doing, because I didn't want to use controller, is this weird thing where on the, sorry, going all over the place. On the question controller, I have column set to be this computed property, which is an alias of looking at target.target.column. And definitely, this is the suckiest part of this code base here. And it's something that could be greatly fixed by the control helper, because this question controller would basically be within the scope of a particular column controller. Column controller knows its column number, and rather than having to weirdly go up this chain of target.target and finding the column controller, which knows about its column, I would be able to just actually control helper would be from within the template. You know what? Everything I'm saying could be actually totally wrong here, but there's this controller hierarchy that Ember's still trying to get right, and the control helper is one piece of it. There might be another like little piece of API that'll help from like within just the actual controller code versus the template. But this idea of like sort of nested controllers being in their own world, being able to reference a different column controller than might be in like another particular column, it's sort of all in this sort of controller hierarchy world that Ember's still trying to get right. And I think when it does, it'll be quite powerful. And there's another little question that's coming up that'll maybe sort of compare it to Angular.js approach, which has sort of a silly name to it, but it's kind of their solution to this challenging problem. So I hope that was in some way useful, even though I think I ultimately got some of the logic wrong as to where the control helper might actually be useful. But I don't remember who has the mic.
I feel like it's Casey.
Take Ember handlebars for 800.
When using the each helper, this option will link each rendered item with its own instantiated controller. It's very related to what we were talking about, but not quite the same. Got a answer questioner back there?
What is with?
No, not the with helper. This is so you would have each name of this property equals some string value, and this is what will kick in this behavior.
Excel's hand was reaching for the buzzer. I'll buzz in. Beep beep. Alex, what is item controller?
Item controller, exactly. So if you say each controller or each object's item controller equals some name of a controller, then every single one of those iterations, one of those rendered views, I guess, will be attached to a newly instantiated controller, which I definitely make use of in this project too. You know, within the templates, I have the column, and then for each of the questions in that column, each of them has its own little question item controller. So take a look at some of the source if you're curious how some of this works, but I definitely make use of it. It's very helpful.
Let's go with culture for 800.
Coined by Angular.js, this scope-related word is a favorite trolling target among Ember enthusiasts. Chris, do you want to take a shot at it?
That'd be, what is transclusion?
Yes, absolutely. Has anyone heard this raise the hands, transclusion, this funny little word? Chris is the maybe the most experienced Angular.js person in this room. He's also my roommate, so I sort of drag him, guilt him into coming to these things. But do you know how to explain what that is? First of all, transclusion is not in the dictionary.
Yeah, it's a totally made-up word.
Really? There's lots of cults that make up words, though, that wind up in Wikipedia.
I don't know. I've never had to explain this in public, so this is kind of tough.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
As far as I understand it, if you look it up, it's something about like plucking the scope in a particular thing and shifting. Do it.
So transclusion in Angular is a fancy word for take what is inside this template. So Angular lets you define your own HTML tags, basically. Normally you don't always put stuff in it. It's just I have a widget like a UI, something like a date picker, and I make a new date picker tag, and it will just render a date picker. The transclusion property says, if I have a date picker tag that something's in it, make it the title, or like you can use whatever is inside that tag. Transclusion by itself is just a bad word. It's a word that's really complicated.
Would it be better represented by scope teleportation?
Sure.
That sounds a little less mystical than transclusion.
Sounds kind of like yield? No?
Something like that?
Oh, yeah. Let's go with the router for 400.
400. Use this handlebar's helper to nest content provided by child leaf routes. Okay, yeah, I got it. Sorry. Should. Sorry, dude. Oh, wait, you don't have to answer it. I'm forgetting the rules of Jeopardy. My bad. Nice. Anyone have a go? So nesting view content based on the current state of the router, whatever route you're in. Rhymes with, I won't give it away.
I saw someone's hand going for the buzzer.
I'm going to have a guess. Is it outlet?
It is outlet, absolutely. So when you have basically a route structure, and each of the parent routes has like a little bit more to add to it, but they need to kind of continue to nest until it gets to the leaf route, you want to use the outlet helper, which basically says, this is an empty gap for it to fill in with some nested route content. So, yes. You're up.
I'll take the router for 200, please.
200. This function is the entry point for drawing out your application's routes.
What is map?
Yes, so what is router.map? And basically is a DSL that you can use to say where all different routes are and all the nested routes and so on and so forth. It's one of the major improvements of the new router over the old router.
I'll take views for 800.
Views for 800. Daily quadruple, finally. Corey Forsyth will be presenting.
Corey Forsyth, wait, let's go knock and let's see if he's there.
Jean-Claude Van Damme kicked that door down.
Is there a Corey Forsyth in the house? All right, we're teleported from another dimension.
Transclude him over here.
From the Gotham Ruby Conference planning meeting. We have the one, the only.
Corey. All right, there you go.
And Corey's going to give us a little lightning talk on drag and drop with Ember.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry that I was in the side room at the beginning of this. I just wanted to talk a little bit. I've been doing some sort of like a general experimentation, playing around with Ember, and wanted to talk about some of the stuff that I did with drag and drop. It's just it's not super highly advanced or anything, but I think it's like a really good example of how some of the stuff that I like a lot about Ember, how it makes easy things easy and makes them sort of like very elegant, and the code that you write is separated from the concern and the view concern. Okay. So, oh yeah, just the first little disclaimer. I had a lot of trouble using JS Fiddle. I don't know if anybody else has the trouble when like playing around with making little Ember test apps, but JS Bin is really great. It's got, you can add Ember as a dependency, and it's become my favorite way to like play with a little thing in Ember. Try something out. It's easier, I think, than even starting your own local server to do it. Okay, so how many people are familiar with like how the drag and drop HTML5 API works? Anyone? Okay, so I'll give a little bit of a walkthrough. The first thing you do is you add a draggable attribute to a DOM node, and then the HTML5 API has these events: drag start, drag end, and drag. And Ember gives us in a view, it gives us hooks into those events, and then with the Ember attribute bindings, you can also set the attribute on the thing itself. So you end up having to do very little. It's a bit cramped. Okay, so yeah, one of the really cool things about this is all the way through putting this stuff together, you actually almost never really have to write any HTML. You'd never have to write any HTML for the purpose of like handling event handlers or adding these attributes or something like that. So I'm just going to sort of walk through how I sort of went about doing this. Cool. So we've got a little Ember app. We create a view. Hide the output for a minute. So we've got our general application template, and the view template is just a very simple little thing here that checks whether the view is dragging, uses a property, and then changes how it displays if it is. And so right now it's not draggable, but we can add the attribute binding very easily.
I can give him mine.
I'll
do that?
keep. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll keep talking this. So okay, thanks. Okay, can you hear me okay now? Am I on? It's not turned on. Yes. Okay. Cool. Okay, that's easier. So yeah, so you can add a attribute binding. If you recall from the other slide. Oops, I don't have it. Sorry, don't have it handy. Oh, it's in the full screen. Okay. Anyway, if you recall from the other slide, we had to add that attribute of. There we go. We wanted to add the attribute of draggable. So in Ember, you just add a attribute binding for it, and then it needs to be the property string, the property true as a string, and now it is draggable. Oh, it should be. Let's see. Bindings, plural. Okay, so now it's draggable. You just move it around. And then I've lost my full screen. Does anyone know how to get back to the full screen slideshow in here? I've lost my tab command for it. I'll just go here. Okay, I'll just do it as a non-full screen thing. Okay, And so now we have something that's draggable. We want to add the events to it. So I'll do that. Okay. Oh, crap. I'll start from the end. Okay. There we go. Okay, so this is the final one. Yeah, so then you can just, in Ember, you add these drag start and drag end events, and we'll just set properties on the view itself. So the view is going to respond to these properties of dragging. We turn it on when the drag starts, and we turn it off when the drag ends. And then you can do things like change it as it moves around, stuff like that. And it's like literally don't have to change any of the actual code itself, any of the HTML itself. It's all in Ember, and it's very sort of like elegant that way. I think I have lost my, just go back. Okay, I sort of lost the full screen. Anyway, okay. And then the next step is to make something droppable. In HTML5, you don't actually have to have any HTML attributes on the DOM node to make it receive a drop. You just need to implement any of these handlers, the drag enter, drag leave, drag over, and drop. I'll try to do that live again, see if this works okay. So this is where we were before, except now we have a droppable view. It's got a little bit of CSS here to make it look different. And so literally all you have to do is implement the drag enter event. Let's drag over true. And the drag leave. And now it knows when something is dragging over it and responds appropriately. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to make it so that we can actually drop something on it. And to do that, you implement the drop handler. And these are all events that the Ember view knows about and will delegate for you properly. You would have to do some other stuff to do your own custom event, but these are ones that Ember knows about. And then we can do, let's see here, what's the name? Did receive drop. Okay, so you do that and drop it on it, but nothing happens. And the reason for that is it's sort of an unusual, like a sort of a worky part of the HTML5 API. You have to catch this drag over event and prevent the default on the event. So when you do that, now it knows, and like that drop event properly fires. And so now we've got the ability to drag something, the ability to receive a drop, and then so we'll move forward here. And then the final thing is we want to be able to send a little bit of information between the two when we do that. And so the HTML5 API has a data transfer object that lives on the event that gets passed around. So when you start your drag, you can enter information into it by using set data. And I'm just going to jump to the end one here. And set data accepts two arguments, a string for the type of data that you set, and then the value, which also has to be a string. So this is in our drag start. In our draggable view, we'll create a little object. It's going to have the ID of the view. And we'll use that later to look up which view was the one that got dropped. And then data transfer.setData just takes a string, which is the type, and then a second string, which is the actual data. And since it can only accept strings, we are going to use JSON to stringify it. And then on the other side, in our droppable view, in the drop method, we are going to basically just re-inflate that data out of the event transfer get data property. And then we look up the Ember view by that ID. And I added a custom event so that we can sort of send back into our view that was dropped, we can tell it what the view that it was dropped on was, if that makes sense. And so it looks a little bit like this. So as you drag it, I added names to these things, and I also duplicated the draggable. So you can sort of see the draggable, drag it onto the droppable, and then it knows the name of the thing that got dropped onto it. And this view here calls back into that view, calls the was dropped on, and passes this, so it knows that this original one knows what it got dropped upon. And so, any questions so far? Yeah. Sure. So you don't have the clone? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, sure, yeah, the question was when you drag the object like this, it leaves the clone. You mean this one on the back, not the one sticking on your mouse? Yeah. Is there a way to make it so that you don't leave that clone behind? Yes, I'm sure there would be. I mean, for one, I mean, I guess you have the view, yeah? Yeah, I mean, the view knows it's being dragged, so you could change any of its properties that way. So you could, like, bind visible to whether it's being dragged. Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to do it during a live demo, but I think that something like that would probably work, yeah. Yeah, yes? Oh, I haven't really used the jQuery draggable, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I just popped in and focused only on Ember doing this. Yeah, sure. Oh, well, I mean, jQuery actually. Yes, yeah. So a lot of this might be filtered through that actually. Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure about that. Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, jQuery UI is not, yeah. But yeah, so I guess the answer is that it probably would not know. Sure, yeah. So the question was whether to compare it against jQuery's handling of jQuery UI's handling of drag and drop, and whether it would delegate to that automatically. And the answer is probably no, because jQuery UI is not a dependency of Ember. But the events, these events that get sent here, like the drag start gets an event, that's a jQuery wrapped event with all the extra things that jQuery adds to it. Anything else? Okay, so the final piece, the resistance, is a sort of refactored and cleaned up version of it that I wanted to show you. And this is the part where I think that Ember really just makes things nice and sort of clean and very elegant. It's one of the things I really like about writing Ember code. So I've pulled apart all the stuff that was involved in the draggable that was specific to dragging, and I pulled it into a mix-in here. So now we've got a draggable view mix-in. It's got all the methods and properties that we were talking about before. I did the same thing for droppable. So now our draggable views and our droppable views just look very simple. We're only specifying the template, and then we're mixing in the draggable functionality. So it's sort of nice and clean. You could see how you could port this to other views and stuff like that. And then just to show how flexible it is, I made a drag droppable view. And all I had to do was mix in both of the draggable and droppable properties. And let's see if I have that in here. So I'll make that. So now if I turn each of these views into a drag droppable view, and I did have to create another template for it, but that was only so I could add a little bit more information to sort of show what was going on. But now we've got, with almost having to do nothing, we've got something where all of them are draggable and droppable. The CSS doesn't cascade very well because they're sort of like stomping on each other. But every one of them, you can pick it up and drop it on any of the other ones of them now. And it's very cool. Just by composing these mix-ins, you get all the functionality of both. So I thought it was very nice and elegant. Thanks, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'll post my slides to this onto the Ember meetup list later.
Corey. That was great. All right, I'm going to make up a clue for this one. When you're extracting functionality to share among many objects, as Corey did in this example, you might create this type of Ember object to share those methods.
What is a mixin?
Go forth.
I will take Ember views for 1,000.
For 1,000. You can schedule operations on this run loop queue to fire after DOM elements have rendered. Devotee, yep. That would be in front.
What is after render?
What is after render? Definitely. That was one of the things I talked about at the last Ember meetup. So, yep.
Contributing for 600?
Contributing for 600. In the Ember repo, this rake task rebuilds Ember.
What is rake dist?
Rake disk is correct.
The router for 1,000.
Router for 1,000. If model returns one of these, if model returns one of these during a URL navigation, the router will temporarily pause the transition. So remember that model was the answer to one of the previous questions, which was, I believe, how do you catch a change in the URL and then turn that into a context object that gets passed to the controller? And if that context object ends up being one of these, then the router will temporarily pause the transition. Any ideas?
Promise?
It's a promise. Oops, sorry.
Oh, what is a promise?
What is a promise is correct. So a promise is basically an object that has a .then handler, and it's basically used for asynchronous behavior. And it's sort of a complicated topic, but it's a great pattern for handling sort of asynchronous behavior that may succeed or may fail. And the router knows to look out for this, and if you pass it something like an Ember data object which hasn't finished loading yet, it'll basically pause and wait for it to finish loading before continuing with the transition so that leaf routes can have all the information they need to properly load and so on and so forth.
Let's see that.
Oh, yep.
Let's do contributing for 1,000.
Contributing for 1,000. Daily quadruple. Matt Rogish, please come on up.
While Matt's getting set up, I just want to mention to folks that we're going to follow up the meetup tonight with our traditional trip to Central Bar for anybody who wants to come out for a beer. And I always tell people, if you're on the fence about coming, maybe this is your first time at the Ember.js NYC meetup, you don't know anybody, you don't know if you'll feel welcome, you should definitely come out. So everyone's very friendly.
Oh, thank you.
And there's no game shows there.
Who buys the next round?
Happy to have Matt Rogish back up to the Ember NYC stage to talk about automatic model generation from Rails.
How's it going, everybody? Let's wake up. Woo! It's getting kind of quiet. So I'm Matt Rogish, and I'm here to talk about automatic model generation in Rails. So you can follow along at home. There's a blog post where I wrote all of this up because I figured it'd be easier than trying to follow along with the slides. The short URL is just techblog.fundinggates.com. The full URL is down at the bottom, but if you go to techblog.fundinggates.com, it's the first thing. So how many people are using Ember with some sort of a backend? Presumably, oh, many people. Okay, cool. So what always kind of bothered me is that Ember and Rails were all built on convention over configuration. But yet, when I do my Rails model, I then have to do a serializer, and then I have to do an Ember model. So I've got to repeat myself 3 times in order to do something, which I thought was kind of obnoxious. And so I haven't been able to automate the whole thing. I want like a single source of truth somewhere that could then just magically go up. But I think what we've seen in at least the Node community, where there was this platonic ideal of like, I have one model and it exists in both the client and the server, but it turns out that that's not that interesting or really even desirable, because sometimes you have attributes that you don't want to have on the client, or you have attributes that only exist on the client. So I think that the Ember kind of situation is actually a good one, but it is a little bit non-dry. So this is perhaps a way that we found to dry out the process of this. So let's say we have our canonical user model. This is Rails, obviously. I have a couple of attributes. I have an association, and I have a computed attribute. So this should all look familiar to most of you. So now I've got a serializer. Has anybody not used active model serializers? Only a handful, only 1, 2 people. So this is a serializer. It sits in between my Rails model because of configuration. No, because of convention. It just works. Essentially, it converts my model, into JSON. So I have my attributes. I have my association. I have my contributed attributes, and I've added an additional thing, which is Ember birth date, because dates in JavaScript are terrible. So I tend to convert them to something else that I don't have to do math on. So I've just converted the birth date of this user to a string. So everybody kind of understands that, right? No confusion yet. So if I wanted this to function in my Ember app, I would need a model similar to this. This is CoffeeScript. You'll see CoffeeScript throughout the rest of the thing. Just go with it. So we all know how that works. It's really, if you don't know how a model is generated in Ember, then you're in the wrong place. So I want to generate this because this is boring. This is dumb. Why would I have to copy and paste this or write this every single time, right? Now this is an older Ember. It might be different today. So what I've created is a little bit of a rake task to go through all of my serializers and use this magic method called schema, which converts my serializer to a JSON format. So because of this magic, which I think actually we added that to active model serializers, because of that, I now have a JSON representation that is a declarative representation of my user object. And then I just dump it to a little file, app assets, JavaScript, Ember, models, schema.js. So pretty straightforward. Has anybody any questions with that? So it'll output something like this. I've got the attributes, I have associations, and this exists for all of our serializers. There's a whole bunch of them, or posts and models and all the other fun stuff. One thing that active model serializers doesn't care about or look at are validations at all. I don't remember who presented Ember validations a couple of months ago. Ryan Cardarella. I think an interesting project might be, so we wrote our own, which I commented out of here, we wrote our own thing to introspect our Rails models to look at validations and then pass them through to Ember. So we could do validates presence of, we could do validates format of, the regular expressions that are Ruby and JavaScript are a little bit different, so you kind of have to do a translation layer there. But I think with his project, there might be a really neat way to also take and automate all of your validations from your Ember model or from your Rails models and put them into Ember. Because although, we have to discard or we have to not trust anything that comes from the client, we can do some validations just to make our users' lives easier, right? So we're not going to trust anything that comes from the client, but at least it'd be nice to put a little squiggly that says, this is required or something like that. So although that's not here, you could easily add it, and then you'd have another little object down at the bottom that says associations, has many, or validates presence of, and then the attribute. His thing can be, I think, pretty easily converted into a JSON representation. So that is something I didn't think about until when I was putting the presentation together. I was like, oh, that would be so cool to do. And then I was like, oh my God, he's implemented every single Rails validation, which would make it really hard for me to do that. But that would be really cool. And this is a very long, very, it's not really easy to read. We've listed our schema parser here, where we go through all of that. And at the very bottom, which you can't see, how do I get my mouse over there? I can't. Okay. Oh. No? All right. Well, at the very bottom, what we do is with CoffeeScript, we read this JSON object, and then we create a class name base. So in the example that I had before, where I'm working on a user object that I'm sending to my Ember app, I've created user base. Why is that? Because as I said before, there are some attributes that might be Ember only. So I want to be able to extend the object that I just created here to add more stuff to it that maybe only Ember cares about. So that was the convention that we adopted, which gives us a user base object that I can then extend, and I can add a few more attributes that only Ember cares about. So this is our schema, our model definitions, and so we create all of these and we extend our base object, and so we can add a few more things. So that's basically it. It was a really quick lightning talk. I found it to be incredibly useful for all of the attributes that I don't care about. You know, when I just add stuff to my serializer, I know it just magically gets to Ember, and it works really, really well. And I can add some additional things that only Ember cares about, so I keep it dry. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Oh, did you have a Jeopardy question? Answer? I think I've got one. It's coming to me. This technique for creating Ember models from your Rails app is quite useful. Might also be the name for the population of youth who grew up writing software.
Pretty good.
What is?
Code generation. All right. So we got 4 more. Oh, I guess I'm up. No, that's very lame. Luke, why don't you go?
Let's go contributing for 800. Is that Chris?
No, Chris is already announced. We'll do it, I guess, at the end of this thing. This is an Ember-powered public forum for discussing Ember features and ideas. Yeah. Oh, if you want to throw the mic.
It's okay. Go ahead.
What is discourse is correct. Discuss.emberjs.com, I believe, is the public forum for anyone to go on there and discuss any problems you're having or any ideas that you have, and you want to take the framework in a certain direction and discuss all that. That's a perfect place for it. Go ahead.
Ember handlebars for 1,000.
This handlebars/Ember compatible templating language offers an indented alternative to handlebars syntax.
What is handlebars? What is emblem?
What is emblem is correct.
Emblem, in case you didn't catch Michael's sarcasm earlier, it was written by Alex.
You should use it. It's pretty cool.
Reports to him.
Yeah. Go forth.
Oh, geez, what a choice. Well, I'm gonna go large. Culture for 1,000.
Tom Dale retweets the celebrity more often than he tweets about code.
Who is Rebecca Black?
Absolutely, Rebecca Black is correct.
It's Friday tomorrow.
It is Friday. We've got another 3 hours till Friday. All right, Ember application architecture for 800. Who is it going to be? This mechanism is responsible for controllers all having a router property. It was briefly mentioned, and I hinted that there was going to be a future question involving it. What is this mechanism? Where's that awesome track of mine? I mean, we got to play this thing anyway since we're towards the end.
This is our outro.
There we go.
This mechanism is responsible for controllers all having a router property.
You can all pretend that you're betting your... Was that a hand? Oh, just a stretch yawn, perhaps? We don't have to listen to that again.
Hand? Did I see a hand?
Is it, what is dependency injection?
Dependency injection is correct. Absolutely.
Well done. Well done. And here's a hand to Alex for putting this together.
Thank you. We do have a lightning talk from Chris C. that was announced earlier, and I believe
Is Chris here? I don't think he made it, actually.
Oh, he is not present, so yeah.
Which is just fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break. Get a beer, stretch your legs. If you have had enough Ember for tonight, there are no hard feelings if you want to take off. I'm going to do an intro to Ember talk next, which should have a fair amount of meaty material for those who are not brand new as well. And then we're going to go to the bar. So if you want to go to the bar early, do it. If you want to go home, that's fine. Central bar on East 9th between 3rd and 4th, I believe. And if you're into the next bit, grab a beer, get comfortable, and I'm going to set up right now.